Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central. My name is MacDonald and thank you very much for clicking on this video, returning to my YouTube channel and coming after what has been a difficult result at the AMEX. Let's be honest, probably one of the most boring games all season, probably will go on to be one of the most boring games we've played this season, the most boring games to witness, probably one of the worst performances we've at least seen at the AMEX this season, and an all-round, for a cold December day, a pretty dreary, a pretty bleak performance to kind of, to take away with you on this weekend. 1-1 with West Ham. Yes, the positives, we got the result in the end. We ground out a draw. Neither team really could say they deserved anything more than that. I don't think you can say. Brighton weren't great. West Ham weren't great. But I think there's a wider conversation around how Brighton are looking that we need to get into in this game. And I think we need to open up a bit more of a conversation on where we're going to go going forward, what the plan is for Brighton's attack, and kind of how this leaves us going into these next few games over the Christmas period. Some decent games coming up. Liverpool away next week, which seems quite exciting. Sunderland at the AMEX just before Christmas. Arsenal, West Ham again. There are some exciting fixtures along this period where it feels that we can continue that good momentum that we've got. But today, it wasn't one of those days. It was a difficult day. It was a bit of a frustrating day. It was an annoying day. And Brighton, I think, for large periods, weren't good enough. So let's get into it. In terms of the lineup, there were a couple of changes from the last game. Obviously, Seamas out due to that injury. He was replaced by Danny Welbeck. I think we all probably expected that. That was the change we all thought was going to happen. Rutter came in for Gruder as well. We saw Jack Hinshelwood, who'd obviously played most of the game on Wednesday night against Aston Villa after having come on for Stefanos Seamas. He was relegated to the bench. No Yasin Ayari again. But otherwise, it was a pretty much unchanged 11. We had Baleba in central midfield alongside Diego Gomez, Cuyper and Kadioglu on the left wing, Minteh on the right wing, and the usual defensive setup for the Albion. So no real complaints there. I suppose I think for me, it just felt like a classic case for Brighton where we come up against a side, you play the low block, you play quite boring football, you play difficult football away from home. And you know what? Fair play to West Ham because, you're going away from home, you're trying to grind out a result. We would all do it, don't we? We've done it in the past under the Chris Hughton days. We've known to do that. Plenty of sides come to the AMEX. We've not found a way to break them down. That's been the age-old story. I suppose the kind of bucking of that trend that we saw was Leeds at home a couple of weeks ago, probably about a month ago now. We were able to get a solid 3-0 win and soundly beat them. But actually, this was a kind of case again where Brighton were a little bit out of ideas, didn't seem to have loads of options. When defenders just sit back and make things difficult, what are Brighton going to do? And this was another game where I think Brighton did find it quite difficult. Until we really brought players like Gruder on, Hinshelwood, Costulas, there weren't loads of attacking options. It did feel like, despite Georginio Rutter working pretty hard for the majority of the game and ultimately getting the goal in the end, it felt like often he was trying a lot, but he wasn't quite getting anything out of it. He was running a lot. He was running into dead ends a lot. He was getting bundled over. Danny Welbeck couldn't really get a full clutch on the ball. Yankuba Minteh, despite being very hard working, we all know how hard working Yankuba Minteh is, inconsistent, snatching at opportunities, making things a little bit difficult for himself. It never felt like Brighton had clear opportunities to get him behind. And, it was actually shown in the stats that we saw. I think, I can't remember off the top of my head. There was a point in the first half where Brighton had 20 touches in the opposition box, 0 shots. So they were peppering a lot. They were getting into decent areas. They just weren't able to convert it to anything meaningful. And, towards the end of the game, I don't know the stats off the top of my head. We obviously scored that goal. There won't have been many shots on target that we had. I would wager, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots on target in the whole game. And it wasn't brilliant. Yes, we had to ride our luck at times. The West Ham goal was brilliant, really poor defending. Verbruggen had to be called into action on multiple times after that to deal with other issues that we were having. So we did have to get through certain moments. So actually you can say on the balance of things, considering how much of a poor game it was, is it a terrible result? Not really. It's a decent result. We're actually in a period where overall we've had some decent results. You think about this period. Yes, maybe it's a little bit disappointing. We've not been able to beat West Ham. We couldn't quite get that draw over the line in that annoying Villa game in midweek. But you set it into context, Palace, Leeds, Brentford, we've had some good results there in a period where you kind of felt like we had teams around us that we were going to play. And was this going to be a period where we could pick up results, or we were just going to find it difficult? This probably is the first game out of that whole run where Brighton found it quite difficult to break the side down. Usually when we come up against sides around our level, Brighton do find that quite hard. Playing teams around our level or lower at home, where they come in, they sit in, they make things difficult, they do a classic away performance, Brighton find it hard. And we didn't seem to have any options again today. Wingers cutting back instead of taking players on. West Ham given loads of time to reset their defence. Constant hesitation, extra touches. I think that's one thing we've spoken about. I've spoken about it before on this channel in terms of breaking down a low block. We all know how you do that. You've got to have tempo, one-touch passing, intensity. And yes, maybe it's the fact we've played a couple games in a week. Yankuba Minteh has to come off after 70 minutes because, he is absolutely spent after having played 90 minutes in midweek and putting so much into his performances. But I think we just needed that little bit more of zip and excitement and that cutting edge, which we were lacking today. And maybe someone like Stefanos Tsimas would have been quite useful for that. I think, to be honest, when we brought Gruder on, when we brought Jack Hinshelwood on, they did begin to provide that cut and that, incision that we needed a little bit more to get those attacks and get us in behind. Rutter, to be fair to him, kept trying, kept going. There was a part of me that thought maybe he might have to be a player that we would bring off at one point to kind of change things around. But actually, he was the guy who got the goal, worked really, really hard in this game. So yeah, in terms of the equaliser before it came, Areola did have to save a couple of times twice. Van Hecke had a good opportunity, but Brighton never really, I don't think you can necessarily say they really made any proper clear-cut opportunities where you can say, they deserved to go on and get it. There was a moment where they probably could have won it a couple of minutes after the goal. I think on the balance of things, it was a deserved draw for both sides. From a Brighton perspective, I think we've got to give Bart Verbruggen some of his dues at the moment. I think we've got to give him some credit. I thought he put in a very, very good performance. Notably on around 50 minutes when he made that double save from Jared Bowen and Crescencio Somerville. Amazing, it was, to be fair, I thought Paqueta, I thought Bowen, I thought Somerville were all really, really good, really direct. Got him behind quite a few times. I think Brighton are struggling with that ball in between the lines a little bit. You think about what we found in midweek against Villa, where those balls through the middle, cutting between the two centre-halves. We saw it with Ollie Watkins a couple of times against Villa. Even on an opportunity he didn't score, getting in behind our centre-halves, just going straight down the middle. They found luck through that quite a few times. And Bart Verbruggen was forced into making a couple of saves. And I will say these saves were absolutely unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable from Bart Verbruggen. The first one is fantastic. It's a proper, darting save where he's got to really reach out for it. The second one's just pure reaction. It's proper goalkeeping where you get up and you make the save and you react again. I think he really, really deserves his credit. He obviously made that penalty save in the Brentford game a few weeks ago. We're seeing him evolve into a player who's not just a brilliant shot stopper, but is playing with confidence now and is playing with momentum. And I think that's what we all hoped after that penalty save against Brentford, where he'd broken his duck of never saving a penalty, that actually he'd be able to turn around. So I think we've all got to say fair play to Bart Verbruggen because he absolutely deserves what I think is a man of the match performance. I think in terms of Brighton's equaliser, I know West Ham fans are going to feel very hard done by. There is that rule around if it touches your arm in the box, it's automatically ruled out. I get that. But also, are we really, take your biases out of it. If we're all playing football, we all play football. Is that really a handball? Is it really? No, of course it's not. I think, yes, maybe if it was against us, you'd feel a little bit hard done by. But I think for the sake of football, you want those goals to be given. Goodness me. I mean, it's not like it's made any impact on his ability to play the ball, has it? He's not gained any form of advantage by it hitting the underside of his armpit, has it? It's not giving him any advantage. It came off his chest and slightly bounced as it was dropping down. I mean, goodness me, he's not affected the flight of the ball at all. And it was a really brilliant finish from Georginio Rutter. Really hard, really low, brilliant technique. And Brighton absolutely deserved to get back into it. I think if they'd lost 1-0, yes, you would have said that they laboured and they didn't create enough and they were a bit dodgy and they were poor and they couldn't create attacks and they couldn't break them down. I think if they lost it, it would have felt a little bit harsh. The mistake from Van Hecke in the build-up to Jared Bowen's goal was poor, unlike him. And I think actually they did deserve to get back into the game. And the draw was probably the least that they deserved. I don't think any team can really say they did enough to win it. I think for Brighton, it's another point. We're ticking over. It's nice. Still in that kind of top 10 hunt. Still in that European hunt. We're there or thereabouts. We've got a couple of good games coming up. I really fancy us against Liverpool at Anfield. Fancy us against Sunderland at home. Fancy us again against West Ham away. We've had some good results again against them away at the London Stadium in recent years. You know, whether they come, whether they don't, I'm just saying I feel like actually, despite the fact we've got a poor performance today, one of our worst this season, maybe at home, one of those boring, turgid, difficult to break down games that we've had, actually, there were positives there. We're going again, we're going to reset and we can build into this kind of European push again. And I don't think it's all doom and gloom for Brighton. I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. Were you at the game? Were you fortunate to be sat in that drizzling rain? And dealing with the most boring, dull game ever where Brighton had to scrape it back. What did you think? Did Brighton deserve to win it? Should they have lost it? Who was your man of the match? And how do you feel going to the next game? How are we going to start becoming so where we can just look a bit better against sides who sit in? What do you think we need to do? Because it's a problem we've had again and again and again. Or is that just the nature of being a team like Brighton? I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you've got this far in the video and you haven't done it already, please hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on. I would love to see you back on this channel, the fastest growing and most regular Brighton fan YouTube channel out there on social media, on YouTube, wherever it is. I would really, really appreciate it if you would join us as a subscriber. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. And as always, Albion.